The most dangerous person in your office smiles constantly and means every word of it. They're the one who tells you to stay grateful when your workload doubles. The one who says everything happens for a reason, while you're watching your boundaries dissolve. You've been told this person is supportive. By the end of this, you'll see the mechanism they're actually running, and why your instinct to push back was right all along. Toxic positivity operates like a pressure valve installed backwards. Instead of releasing tension, it seals it in. You raise a legitimate concern about working 60-hour weeks, and someone responds with, "At least you have a job." That sentence does something specific to your brain. It takes your lived experience, exhaustion, frustration, the feeling that something is structurally wrong, and reclassifies it as ingratitude. You walked in with a problem. You walk out feeling like you are the problem. That's the mechanism of gaslighting. Someone replaces your perception with theirs and makes you feel defective for having noticed reality in the first place. And workplaces have turned this into a culture. Think about the last time you said, "I'm overwhelmed," and heard you've got this in return. On the surface, encouraging. Underneath, a dismissal dressed in warmth. The subtext translates cleanly. Your struggle is invalid, and the correct response is to perform resilience, regardless of what you're actually feeling. You've been handed a script. Deviate from it, and you become the negative one. The one who kills the vibe, the one who isn't a team player. So you learn to smile. You learn the vocabulary. Grateful, blessed, excited for the challenge. And something inside you starts to rot, quietly, in a place you can't name because you've been trained to wallpaper over it with affirmations. Susan David, a psychologist at Harvard Medical School, spent years studying what she calls emotional agility. Her research found that people who suppress or force positive their emotions consistently show higher levels of stress and lower capacity for resilience over time. The very thing toxic positivity promises, strength, it systematically destroys. The people who handled adversity best were the ones who could sit with discomfort, name it accurately, and respond from clarity rather than performance. So why do workplaces worship the opposite approach? Because toxic positivity is cheap. Addressing burnout costs money. Restructuring workloads requires effort. Hiring enough people to distribute tasks fairly means cutting into margins. Telling your team to focus on the positive costs nothing and shifts responsibility from the system to the individual. You become the variable that needs adjusting. The spreadsheet stays clean. This is where the gaslighting deepens. When an entire culture adopts forced optimism, the person who names a real problem looks like the outlier. You start doubting your own experience. Maybe you are being too negative. Maybe everyone else really does find this sustainable, and you're the weak link. That doubt is manufactured. You're responding normally to abnormal conditions, and the positivity script exists specifically to keep you from realizing that. Consider what happens in a meeting where someone says, "I don't think this deadline is realistic." In a healthy environment, that statement opens a conversation about resources, priorities, trade-offs. In a toxic positivity culture, it gets met with, "Let's focus on solutions, not problems." Sounds reasonable until you notice what just happened. The diagnosis got skipped entirely. You jumped straight to treatment without ever identifying the disease. And somehow, the person who tried to identify it left the room feeling like they did something wrong. This pattern runs deeper than office culture. It reaches into how you talk to yourself. You've internalized the script. You catch yourself feeling angry about being passed over for a promotion and immediately correct the feeling, "I should be grateful for what I have." You feel resentment building toward a colleague who takes credit for your work and you smother it. Negativity won't help. Each correction is a small act of self-betrayal. You're gaslighting yourself now, and you learned how from people who thought they were helping. Anger is information. Frustration is data. Resentment is a signal that a boundary has been crossed. These emotions evolved over millions of years because they serve a function. They tell you when something needs to change. Silencing them with positive affirmations is like disconnecting a smoke alarm because you find the noise unpleasant. The fire doesn't care about your preference for quiet. A critical distinction lives here though. Genuine optimism and toxic positivity look similar from a distance. Up close, they operate on completely different foundations. Genuine optimism acknowledges the difficulty and chooses to act anyway. This is hard, and I believe I can find a path through it. Toxic positivity denies the difficulty exists. Everything will work out. One builds resilience, the other builds a dam that will eventually break. And when that dam breaks at work, it looks like burnout. Or a sudden resignation that shocks everyone except the person who left. Or a health crisis that came out of nowhere, except it came out of 2 years of swallowed frustration and performed gratitude. You've probably watched someone burn out in real time. They were the positive one, the reliable one, the person who never complained. Then one Tuesday, they were gone. Desk cleared. Everyone confused. The truth is they'd been drowning for months, and every stay positive they received was another hand pushing their head below water while smiling about it. Here's what makes this so difficult to fight. The people enforcing toxic positivity usually believe they're helping. Your manager who says, "Let's keep the energy up," genuinely thinks morale is built through enthusiasm. Your colleague who says, "Don't dwell on it," honestly believes rumination is the enemy. They're half right. Rumination is destructive. But there's a vast territory between dwelling on a problem and pretending it doesn't exist, and toxic positivity collapses that entire territory into a binary. You're either positive or you're stuck. No middle ground allowed. The middle ground is where all the useful work happens. Naming a feeling accurately, sitting with discomfort long enough to understand what it's telling you, having the conversation that's awkward but necessary, saying, "I need help," without appending, "but I'm fine," to make everyone else comfortable. That middle ground requires something most workplaces have systematically stripped away: permission to be honest about your experience without performing strength while you do it. So what do you actually do inside a culture that punishes honesty and rewards performance? You start with language. Instead of accepting, "At least you have a job," as the end of a conversation, you can redirect. "I appreciate that perspective, and I still need to talk about the workload." That sentence does something surgical. It acknowledges their input without surrendering your reality. You hold both things at once, gratitude and legitimate concern, because adults can do that even if the culture pretends otherwise. You also stop gaslighting yourself. When you feel frustrated, you let the frustration exist for 30 seconds before reaching for the affirmation. What is it telling you? Where is the boundary that got crossed? What would need to change for this feeling to resolve naturally? Those questions treat your emotions as the diagnostic tools they are, rather than symptoms of a bad attitude. Some of this won't be enough. Structural problems require structural solutions, and all the emotional intelligence in the world can't fix a workplace that's fundamentally designed to extract more than it gives. There are situations where the healthiest response is to leave, and recognizing that isn't negativity, it's clarity. But in the spaces where you do have influence, your self-talk, your close relationships at work, the way you respond when someone trusts you enough to be honest, you can refuse to participate in the gaslight. When a colleague says, "I'm struggling," you can say, "Tell me more," instead of, "You've got this." That sentence, 3 words, is one of the most countercultural things you can say in a modern workplace. It grants permission to be human, without requiring a performance of recovery before the feeling has even been processed. Toxic positivity survives because it disguises control as care. It wraps dismissal in the language of encouragement and makes the person being dismissed feel ungrateful for noticing. That's the architecture of gaslighting, and the fact that it comes with a smile makes it harder to name, harder to fight, harder to resist internalizing. Your discomfort at work is trying to tell you something. It has been trying for a while now. The most radical thing you can do today is listen to it without immediately correcting it, and trust that the person feeling it has better data than the person telling you to cheer up.